Barney, Gorman, and Quincy. In the last month, 8 Massachusetts soldiers have been killed, a dramatic increase. What are your plans to bring the troops home from Afghanistan and Iraq? We can save trillions of dollars and eliminate sacrificing our children.
In reference to Quincy, I was remiss in not saying that one of the great joys of my life is serving with Bill Darling, who has just done a superb job. And I'm very proud of all the delegation. Steve Winks is on the committee that I chair, and he's been a great leader in the veterans area. On Iraq, I will continue to press the president to withdraw quickly. I do not, we were told there were 2 reasons why we could not withdraw from Iraq. One, that things were difficult, and 2, that things were not difficult. That is, both failure and success have been reasons to stay in Iraq. I thought it was a mistake to go in there in the first place. Saddam Hussein was a terrible dictator. He was not as bad as Mugabe is today, as the people in Burma are today, as the people in North Korea are today. It is legitimate to try and put pressure on people who misgovern their own people, but it does not make sense if they are not a threat to others to have a policy you go to war with all of them. If we had war all the time with everybody, it will wind up doing more harm than good. So I hope the president will not be deterred from a fairly rapid withdrawal from Iraq. Afghanistan is a more difficult situation. I thought the war in Afghanistan was justified. Remember, Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan and attacked us, and not just us. People should understand. In 1998, Osama bin Laden, because of his anti-Americanism, blew up 2 American embassies in Africa, and 700 or so Africans who had no role in any of this, by anybody's imagination, were murdered. We said to the Afghan government, the Taliban at the time, we would like you to give him up. They refused to do it. And so I think the war in Afghanistan was a legitimate war of self-defense. The problem is that we then, having launched that war in Afghanistan and having made some progress, went into the war in Iraq, which was, I think, a predetermined decision by George Bush. I think they wanted to get into Iraq, and they used this excuse to do it. And that severely weakened our ability in Afghanistan. By the way, one of the serious problems in Afghanistan is the terribly antiseptic term collateral damage, innocent people killed. In any war, it's inevitable. But it was worse in Afghanistan because all the manpower was in Iraq. So the Afghan war had to be fought unduly with air power. And air power is the least discriminating as between good people and bad people. We now have a deteriorated situation in Afghanistan. I will throw in one thing that's somewhat not the popular view. Part of the problem that's been there and elsewhere is this decision that among the things we have to do is to drive out the drug trade. Look, if we want to stop the drug trade in much of the world, then let's get serious about trying to get prevention programs and treatment programs in America. Because it is the one habit of Americans that leads to a destabilization in other countries. My conservative friends forget their lesson about supply and demand. As long as there is a substantial demand for drugs in the richest country in the world, supply will come forward. And trying to snuff out the supply is going to destabilize those countries. But we now have to seriously rethink Afghanistan. And that includes trying to figure out what we do politically. Here's the dilemma. There is a temptation to say we will leave. On the other hand, we did go into Afghanistan for good reasons. And I do not want to leave people who joined us at the mercy of a really very unpleasant group of thugs. There was a story in the New York Times the other day about the number of civilians who have been killed in Afghanistan, and that's a terrible thing, but they did make the point that most of them were killed by the Taliban and by Al-Qaeda. So Afghanistan is a more difficult one. Iraq, I believe we should withdraw as quickly as is logistically possible. In Afghanistan, it's a terrible thing. Look, I've been to a lot of the funerals. I try to go to the funeral of anybody who lived in my district who was killed in either war. I know we just lost somebody from Rockland. I saw him off. Terrible thing to experience. I was in Taunton. He was a member of the military police group that went over. And I was in Taunton when we waved to them, cheered him on, and that he was killed in an accident, but it was an accident that wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been in Iraq. I attended a ceremony in Middleborough for a man in his 40s who returned from Afghanistan military who lost both legs. And I said, look, I voted to India. That's a tough thing. So we take this very seriously. And I am wrestling now with what we do about Afghanistan. I do think some of the Afghan people have some claim on us, but if it does not look as if this is going to be successful, then you do more harm than good. And acknowledging an inability to accomplish a goal is not, in my judgment, anything that a great country should be ashamed to do. I don't think we're at that point yet in Afghanistan. So I give you an easy answer on Iraq. I want us out of there as soon as possible. I'm still wrestling with Afghanistan.